Yeah, and just make sure you're close enough. Bradley, you hear yourself on the speakers.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Oh, here's one.
All right, it's now 6 o'clock. The cameras are rolling. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Auburn Planning Board for its May 10, 2022 meeting here in Council Chambers. I'm going to begin with introductions. I'm going to start on my left.
Darren Finnegan.
Joshua Daigle.
Evan Sear.
Stacy LeBlanc.
Tony Ferrara.
Matthew Duval.
Riley Bergeron.
This evening, we have a regular member absent due to a personal issue, Mr. Brian Dubois. In the case where a regular member is absent, one of our associate members, in this case either Mr. Jacques or Mr. Daigle, would be elevated to act in that member's place as a full voting member. Tonight, we're going to elevate Paul, so for the remainder of the meeting, he will be acting as a full member of the board. That means that he can make motions and vote as well. Mr. Daigle will continue as an associate member, meaning that he is able to ask questions, engage in discussions, but is not allowed to make motion or take vote or make votes. I apologize. Normally, the next item on our agenda would be minutes. However, the minutes for the May 3rd and May minutes for the May 3rd meeting will be made available at the June 28th meeting. That's when we'll vote on those. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing, special exception for RJF Moore and Brickyard, Brick LLC, seeking to develop a 50 plus or minus acre lot on Penley Corner Road. Moore and Brick proposes a clay extraction pit at parcel ID number 113-015. The project is pursuant to Article 16, Division 2 and 3, Article 4, Division 2, and Article 8. The roughly 50-acre lot is currently undeveloped land with a mixture of field and forested areas. Moore and Brick plans to excavate approximately 19 total acres. The current zoning is agricultural and resource protection. So that members of the public understand what the process will be, we will receive a presentation from staff. Planning board members may choose to ask questions of staff after that presentation. We will then invite the applicant or a representative of the applicant to come forward, and they will be given the opportunity to respond to any of the questions they've asked the board posed to staff, as well as add any additional information they believe may be applicable. After that, we will open the public input section of the hearing. When we get to that section, I will let members of the public know what our basic rules are regarding that section of the meeting. When the public input section has concluded, we will enter into deliberation and make a final decision. So at this time, is staff ready to present their report?
Yes. All right, so our first one, as the chairman just said, is Moore and Brick. So what this project is there is a proposal to develop 19 acres of a 50 or so acre plot in the agriculture and resource protection zone. And this project was reviewed under a few articles. The first is the agriculture and resource protection requirements. The next is excavation, which has a different set of requirements that the applicant must meet in order for this project to considered for approval. And also just for site plan review and special exception. So excavation will remain 5 feet above the seasonal high water table at all points of the season. We just actually had a walk out by the pit today just to see what it would be like. It's not a developed pit. It's right now. It's ag land. It's a field. There will be a road going from the main road there on Penley Corner. So if you scroll down.
Sure.
Sure, we're awake.
Don't breathe so heavy.
So if you scroll like upward, or maybe down actually. I want to go to see the road, or yes,
Road's
okay.
at the top.
Okay, yeah, actually, yeah, maybe, okay. Well, yeah, okay, so so it's gonna go from the road, and there's actually a tree line where you won't be able to see past it. And once you pass the tree line, they're proposing to put in a new culvert because there is a stream that's identified right in the existing culvert. They will need to widen that a little bit, and that required a permit from DEP. Then the actual mining area is on the other side of the tree line. So, and in that area, they will not be mining more than like 5 acres at a time, 5-6 acres at a time. So what their plan is to really mine it in phases. So they would start from the front part of the pit or the front part of the field, mine there seasonally. At the end of the season, they will have removed the topsoil during the mining. They will have seeded it in order to avoid erosion and maintain the soil integrity. And then at the end of each season, they'll replace the topsoil onto each of the mine pits, or onto each of the phase pits. And the lease for this goes up to 20 years. The applicant does not believe that they might need that amount of time, and it will only happen seasonally. They will have trucks going to and from the pit only for like a few days of the year, I think. But we can get that as a confirmation. And the clay is it's from Auburn. The brick construction, or more brick, is in Auburn as well. So it is right here in town, only happening really a few weeks out of the year. And if this were to be accepted, if we are to make a motion to pass this, our suggestions are that no construction will begin prior to a permit from the Department of Public Works. No construction will occur prior to receiving a permit by rule from the Maine Department of Environmental Protection. And in addition to the proposed rock entrance apron, a 3-foot wide paved apron at the entire entrance width of the site at the same thickness of the existing pavement should be there. So that's just a small technical adjustment staff suggests making. And let's see, for the pit also I'll add is it will be internally draining. So as they will remove some clay, the water runoff will just stay within the pit. It will not be going off site. Noise should be kept to a minimal because there is a tree buffer surrounding the whole pit area. There are minimal wetlands being disturbed, and and the applicant's reclamation plan seems to be pretty substantial. And I think I have any questions.
Any questions for staff?
So we did have a site visit today, and as part of that visit, and you had a great question, Evan, and I don't feel like we really got a good answer to it, is reclaiming that road after everything is done. There was no real parameters around that. So I think I would like something a little bit more concrete, no pun intended, to have an understanding of what that road's gonna look like when it's reclaimed.
The road that goes into, okay, yeah, right now, as it goes in for everyone, it's gonna be gravel. That's what their plan is. But yeah, I think you make a note of that.
I think we can check with the applicant on that too. I didn't read anything about plans to reclaim that. It is an existing farm road. I would guess that they would probably like to keep it for access in the future, but we can ask them.
That's the impression I got from the owners.
Same.
Yeah.
The owner was there at the site visit, and he was like, because he plans on doing other things with it afterwards. So for him, it was more of a good thing to keep it. It seemed.
Yeah, having been at the site, I would assume that if he has plans to access internally, he probably wants to keep it because the farm road that currently exists is really just an area of the field that you drive through. It's not really a road per se. So I guess because I did ask that question about, we talked about reclaiming the pit. I asked questions about the runoff within the pit. My concern that you're basically making a clay bowl, right, by digging down. And the engineer was able to discuss some of the retention ponds and things that they would do with topsoil and so on and so forth. The road is being built for this project. Let me ask, I asked about reclamation of the road because I assumed because it was part of the project, it would be part of the reclamation process. Is the road itself not considered a part of the project, or does it not? Do roads not need to be, in general, do roads not need to be reclaimed when these sorts of things happen?
They could improve that road to the standard that they're proposing as part of the agricultural use of that land. So when we can talk to the applicant, but after that investment is made, that's a piece that kind of gets left with the owner that I would guess they would see as added value from participating in leasing their land to have that access for future agricultural uses.
To be honest, I'm not sure I would have asked the question about reclamation. I didn't realize that it was considered a road to begin with. What I walked on I would not have considered a road, but.
But they could improve it like this for the farm, but a lot of times that won't happen because
absolutely.
of the cost.
Other questions?
Yeah, so I've got one about the soil erosion and I think it's wording around the best management practices. Are you trying to say that they will follow them, and if it's observed that they are not following them, that the response that they will have to change their practices within 7 days? It's on page 3, about halfway down. It just wasn't clear.
Yeah, this came directly from the application that was submitted. I took the language from that. I think the engineer could probably give more information.
Yeah, it looks like they're committing to rectifying any issues with best management practices within 7 days. We could get them to clarify
Yeah,
that.
it just, the way it's worded,
It's
is
not.
that you're changing a best practice if it's not being met, which is kind of circular, bizarre logic.
I think we can ask the engineer for an
Okay,
answer.
yeah, I'd like clarification on that, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll call for the applicant or the representative of the applicant to come forth and either answer questions or share additional pertinent information.
Hello, Kyle Jacobson with St. Germain, engineer for the applicant. Thank you again for the site walk today. We had a great discussion on the project. A beautiful day to be outside and meet all of you. And thank you for laying out the project for us. It probably don't have to say anything, but a couple things. First off, on the BMPs, I guess that language is along the lines of sometimes you'll see on construction sites where there'll be a silt fence, which would be like a best management practice, but maybe it got overwhelmed by a rainstorm. So then that best management practice would be fixed. You know, they'd just put a new silt fence up or dig it out. So they'd be remedying the already best management practice that's there. So that would be kind of what it would be regarding.
So it's more like just ensuring that they continue to be followed.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maintaining. Yep. Regarding the road questions that we had, I think to echo what's already been said, I think the road would remain after the project be done, would provide great access, and the investment that's already been put into the grading and the gravel outlay for that road would be significant. So it's a part of the site now, and we're replacing the existing culvert that's already there. So there was a road there at some point. They used that path that we walked down to access that backfield. So it's it'll be an improved access to the site. I think that's. Any other questions, I guess?
So during the site visit, I had asked a question about after the area has been reclaimed. I guess as the site visit went on, it seemed to be clearer that the higher areas are what we're being focused on mostly, so that the property would probably end up being more or less flattened by the time this is done. However, it's possible that there could be dips created because of the removal of material. And so I had asked a question about how you did a good job explaining how water is treated during the process, and that as you're going, the water is staying in. The possibility of creating retention ponds and trying to manage the water so it stays and is either evaporating or making its way through the ground. But there wasn't really much discussion about what that looks like after the reclamation process and whether or not there would be some BMPs implemented to sort of manage any new issues with surface water created because of the extraction of the clay. Are there any plans for that?
Well, the reclamation plan in the plan set does show some proposed contours of what it may look like after the clay is extracted. But I guess once each section, each phase of the pit is reclaimed, that may look different. And if there were to be some ponds or shallow areas that would accumulate water during a storm, that would be probably left to be more natural. They'd be reseeded to the 90% of seeding that's expected in the BMP. But I guess it's kind of a nebulous how it will look at the end of, at the end of the project or at the end of each season, how that's going to look when it's done. So I guess I'm not exactly sure how to explain that.
Yeah, and I guess my primary concern is that when we were there, we saw what was explained as essentially a spring-fed sort of stream. And so where we were standing definitely graded down towards that. Any of sort of hillier areas we were looking at graded towards that, above that, graded in the other direction. But I guess my concern is that, the idea was that everything was supposed to be essentially captured internally, right?
Yes.
After reclamation, is that going to be the case, or are the contours now, will they have changed such that you're adding, groundwater flow to that stream, or?
It won't be groundwater flow, right? It might be some surface water.
I guess surface water, I apologize.
Surface water flow perhaps, after the reclaim. After each portion is reclaimed, it's no longer part of the working pit, so then it's doesn't need to meet the requirement of internally drained, I guess, would be one way to look at it. So that would be, there'll be topsoil to accept some stormwater, there'll be plants to evapotranspirate stormwater, but whether or not there's, the contractor needs to put in swales or berms to help to make sure no water goes into the stream that's there, I guess is how it will be laid out.
Okay.
It's not really answering your question, I guess.
It's
I'm
not answering
trying
my
to
question.
be- yeah,
That's okay. One could make the argument that the current surface water
goes there.
probably goes there.
Yeah.
I guess the concern would be, does it make a difference after you've mined this clay? Have the soils been disturbed in such a way that now you're creating a different situation, even though you're getting surface water from one area flowing to where it's always flowed? Is it now carrying something different with it than it was before? So
Yeah, I would think it's also possible if you change the grade, you're gonna change how surface water runs off.
yeah, it's clear that the grade is changing quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So refresh my memory, maybe you mentioned this today, but so when you do reclaim those 4 to 5 acres, because you guys are going in incremental steps, how soon do you start to replace the topsoil? Is it after the whole project is completely done, or after that phase is done?
After that phase is done.
Okay.
So it's a yearly reclamation on the
Of like
project.
2 weeks, correct?
Yeah, so there's,
It's like
maybe-
once a year, 2 weeks out of that 1 year
yep,
ish.
yep. So there has to be ideal conditions to remove the
Yeah.
clay. It can't be too wet to transport to Moran's facility. So after that, they'll push the topsoil off, extract the clay, push the topsoil back on and seed it, and then it'll be seeded and established seed before fall hits.
So I got one more question. Back to the road. So the 5th phase or 4th phase, whatever it is all the way down the far end. Is that road going to be continued as you extract? Like, is it going to be continually extended?
Yes.
Yeah.
It would be inside that, where the pit now is, I guess.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for speaking to us. At this point, we would come to the public input section of the hearing. I'd like to explain the rules for public comment quickly. Members of the public are invited to address the board regarding this topic. Members of the public are asked to speak into the microphone provided and begin by stating their name and address. If speaking on behalf of someone else, please state this prior to providing comment to the board. We ask that speakers please limit their comments to 5 minutes as per the planning board policies and procedures. Each speaker will be asked to speak only once during each public comment section of a hearing unless the board chooses to allow such additional time. The rules of the board indicate that this time is intended for the board to hear from the public, and it is not the policy of the board to answer questions during the public comment section of a hearing. Generally, members of the planning board will take notes during public comment and address questions that may arise once public comment has been closed and prior to deliberation. That is to say, generally we take notes to make sure that those questions that are asked during public comment are asked by us of staff, so that way an answer can be received. In some very limited circumstances, the board may seek clarification from staff during public comment or ask for clarification from a member of the public who is addressing the board. So, having just explained that, I will seek a motion to open the public comment section of the hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion to open and a second. All those in favor? We have now opened the public input section of the hearing. If you would like to speak on this topic, please come forward and use the podium. Seeing as there are no members of the public who wish to speak on this topic, I would seek a motion to close the public input section of the hearing.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? All right. Thoughts?
I guess on a little side note, traffic coming out of Penley Corner and Riverside, that's a pretty tough intersection, and with trucks hauling a lot of clay out of there, it's going to be tough for anybody traveling down Riverside to potentially see that to the last second. So I would just, I don't know, maybe we can get some signage in there or make that part of the deal. With the volume, I don't think it's that.
I think she said there was like 2 to 3 trucks, right?
Right,
Yeah,
but
like
just
going in
thinking
and out.
that from a public safety perspective, just maybe some type of signage wouldn't be bad of, construction during, while they're hauling material out of there. You could see even your own personal vehicle pulling out of there. That's kind of a tough corner and seeing, so.
Question?
Just a thought at least, but.
I think it's a good concern to raise. I have a question of staff. Perhaps I am quite mistaken, but it would seem to me if they're hauling clay from the site to Moore and Brick, it would not make sense to go. Are those trucks going to go down to Riverside Drive and then drive in through New Auburn and then, up South Main Street and out Old Danville, or are they just going to, cut across?
I think we'd have to ask the applicant. I know in the past we have tried to direct traffic, dump truck traffic from the composting facility next door towards Riverside to avoid having a lot of heavy vehicles on the back roads. But where this is just a couple of weeks a year during regular business hours, I don't know that that's as much of a concern as, dump trucks year round. But we can ask them what path they would prefer to take. And
Would they be willing to speak to that now? Yes, because it's being recorded. I apologize. It's for public record.
It's our wish to turn left out of the site towards towards Moore and Brick. It's about 4.8 miles going left and about 10.5 going right. So just the number of trucks and even though it's not a large amount, it's a significant time and diesel cost to run the trucks and manpower to run the trucks to the right rather than the left.
Okay.
So I guess along those lines, I have a question for staff. So was that actually considered? Because I remember when we talked about Lopka, it was Public Works was concerned that traffic actually do go down to Riverside.
yes, and I think it was a combination of that was a year-round operation. When they were operating at full capacity, they had to remove material from there throughout the winter and spring during road-posted conditions. So that project upgraded Penley Corner Road from the facility to Riverside Drive. This sounds like it's all happening in July and August. We can certainly check with Public Works, but I don't think there'll be a concern about that type of traffic for a couple weeks a year during those dry, warmer months when there's no threat of frost in the roads.
Yeah, I think that would be useful.
Could certainly condition it on Public Works approving their route of travel.
Yep.
So if you take a left out of Penley Corner, do you go down Riverside Drive?
You go towards Harmon Street, or Harmon,
Harmon's Corner Road.
yeah, Harmon's Corner Road,
Okay.
towards
I was
Warren
just
Brick.
curious, yeah.
So,
Yeah, I apologize. I just asked a question. Having grown, I grew up in New Auburn, and we use those roads all the time, riding bikes and so on and so forth. And we have a camp in Poland, so we used to drive by the brick yard all the time. That was sort of the preferred route. So I was just thinking to myself, like, it's an excellent point, but I don't know if I was the one driving the truck, I wouldn't. I would just bang a left and go up. Yeah. So thank you very much.
I guess I could ask one of the, I couldn't make the site walk, but someone who did, how that effective that visual buffer on the front of the property between the road and where the mining's going to happen is someone who was there. Want to give me a little description of it? Or? I saw that. I mean, I can see the pictures and the contours on the elevation map. Seem like it's.
So there's one spot that's proposed that was a smaller spot that exists between the road and the tree line. That's obviously very visible from the road. I would say the rest of it is not visible at all. The tree line was really good, actually.
Thanks.
I don't know what everyone else thought, but I thought it was.
No,
It doesn't look
yeah.
like you'll even know something's going on back there.
Well, if there's no more discussion, I'm gonna
So
call for someone to
actually,
make it.
Just because I couldn't make the site walk either, those of you who did, you said that the grade will change a fair amount. Are we going to have increased grades toward the stream or decreased?
Decrease.
Decreased. Okay, great. Thank you.
Right now there's like knolls, and that it will actually just be more flat. Seems like it will be more usable for the seller in the future too.
So the way the process was described to us, and they had test wells, they, according to regulations, can only get within 5 feet of the high water mark of the water table. And of course, the water table does follow contours, particularly gradual, large contours, but these were sort of like, yeah, they were sort of very small hills. So they were actually anticipating pulling most of the material out of those high spots rather than the low spots. So kind of creating a flattening effect.
Yeah, I was just concerned if you increase the gradient toward the stream, you're going to increase erosion, and that could lead to degradation of the property overall. So.
Yeah. Would anyone, if there's no more discussion, would anyone like to, or no more questions, would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll give it a whirl. I make a motion to approve the development of approximately 19 total acres as a clay excavation pit within approximately 50.1 acre site identified on the tax map as parcel ID 113-015 as a special exception with the following conditions. No construction will occur prior to receiving an excavation permit from the Department of Public Works. No construction will occur prior to receiving a permit by rule from Maine Department of Environmental Protection. In addition to the proposed rock entrance apron, a 3-foot wide paved apron at the entire entrance width of the site at the same thickness of the existing pavement. I'm not sure that's worded quite well. The applicant must also meet all other requirements named by the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, in addition to those local ordinances named above. Number 5, that during times when the excavation is active, signage be placed. Well, actually, scratch that one. First, we'll do that Public Works should approve the route of travel. And if that route of travel includes the intersection of Penley Corner and Riverside Drive, that signage be placed around that intersection during periods of excavation.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? None being, motion passes. Next is a public hearing for a zone change request at 278 Poland Road at the Hammond lumber site. The requested zone change is pursuant to Article 17 amendments is for an approximately 1.75 acre parcel located at 278 Poland Road and identified by the City of Auburn as lot parcel ID number 199-041 and is within the city's suburban residential zone and borders Auburn's industrial zone. The zoning on the property is proposed to become industrial. So that public knows, we will proceed with the same process for this public hearing as we did for the last, hearing from staff, the applicant, public comment, and then discussion and final action. So is staff ready to present?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment, as you described, is proposed pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 17, Division 2, which are the standards for considering zoning or map changes, either text or map. This particular change was initiated by a petition signed by more than 25 registered voters of the city. As the board knows, there are 3 ways to initiate a petition. Either the planning board can initiate, the council can initiate, or it can be initiated by signatures of 25 registered voters on a petition. One of the primary tests of whether or not a zone change should be considered or approved, recommended by the planning board to the council for approval, is whether or not it's consistent with the proposed future land use plan. As part of the 2021 comp plan process, the update process, this particular parcel remained as a designation of suburban residential, but also the future land use plan makes it clear that the future land use map is not a zoning map, that it is intended to, in a general sense, dictate the expected patterns of development over time, and the board certainly has the ability to vary from that where it makes sense, as long as the general development pattern of residential versus commercial is kept intact and consistent with the plan. Staff believes that this is a relatively minor change of 1.75 acres to vary from that, and certainly within what the comp plan is referencing when it specifically says that it's intended to depict the general pattern of development, not the exact boundaries. The business requesting it has been here in Auburn under more than one name, but as a lumber yard for 61 plus years. It looks from deed research that this former farmhouse that's since been removed was actually in the same ownership as the former owner of the lumber yard when the lumber yard was established. Hammond Lumber has purchased it, removed the building, and has proposed the zoning change. One thing that is not a part of the current review, but we wanted to make it clear to the public and to the board, is that this recommendation tonight does not include any kind of a site plan approval. It's purely based on whether or not the zoning should be changed. Hammond Lumber will have to propose a site plan later with the parking areas shown, as well as buffering standards met for buffering their current use, but also any proposed parking lot from the abutting land uses. And one thing that's a bit awkward at the site now is the number of curb cuts. So we would also anticipate that they would try to remedy that by reducing the number of curb cuts and confining those vehicle movements as part of an eventual site plan review, but not as part of the current zone change. Staff recommends that the board support and recommend approval of it. The applicant has met the standard of submitting the petition with required signatures. They identified the abutters within 500 feet. We did send abutters notices as required by the ordinance for this request. The property abuts the existing industrial zone and would essentially be merged with the industrial use, a lumber yard. And having a lumber yard within the city is a great benefit, great convenience for property owners that are already here or people that are building new homes or business. The proposal can be implemented without detriment to city resources or disruption of city plans, and that it does meet the general future land use pattern of development proposed for this area and is consistent with the comp plan. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? I have a question. Was the sole, I've been having some discussions with folks, and I seem to see a lot of this where, you know, something was identified as something because that's what it is now, but not necessarily because it made sense. Was that, and I'm going to ask maybe if Matt remembers, because although, who else was on future land use? It was
I wasn't really. It was Dana and Jason.
yeah, they're gone. So
Yeah, they're gone.
yeah. Maybe staff can speak to this. Do they know, was that left in suburban residential simply because there was a house there? I mean, to me, it seems sort of awkward that it would have been, given that we got industrial directly behind it, you know?
I know we did discuss some specific locations where it had come up that there was either desire or logic to changing the boundaries. I don't remember this one specifically coming up, but it wouldn't have popped up in looking at the land use areas because we still had it classified as a single-family home at the time. I don't think it ever rose to the level of being discussed as a specific parcel and whether or not it made sense to change.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't. I would guess they just followed the existing zoning boundary because to pick all those things would be a lot.
Well, that's the thing, right? Once we get down to the parcel scale, we notice a lot of these things that weren't necessarily evident at the beginning. Any other questions? Okay. Since this was a zone change that was created by petition, we don't have an applicant as such, but we do have an interested party that would be akin to an applicant. So is there anyone who was involved with the creation of the petition to do the zone change that would wish to answer some questions?
There is.
Thank you, board members and staff. My name is Jim Seymour. I'm a civil engineer from Sebago Technics. With me tonight is Steve Prey, Vice President of the Hammond Southern Regional Offices. The reason for this zone change request was primarily Hammond Lumber purchased this property, I believe, in 2018 or 19. There was a barn and a home there, and at that time, they demolished the barn and they cleared the property and is now just one big lawn area out there. Hammond primarily did that, I believe, to enhance its visibility from Poland Road and to give a little more presence to the business. As discussed, Hammond Lumber has been there for almost 34 years, so a successful business in the area. They obviously wanted to upkeep their property and make a better street presence. At this time, what they'd like to do is be able to put some enhancements to the building, primarily though to use that property for additional parking, for ADA compliance, and for better I'll call it organization of the lot. Coming in off Poland Road right now, it's a little disorganized with the curb cuts and with the flow of traffic. So the idea is to have a better organization there in the front and provide separation from customer parking and some of the pickup and deliveries that happen behind the building or off to the side of the building. As I mentioned, or it's been discussed, we will have to go to the planning board with a site plan. On top of that, this is under a DEP site location of development permit, so we'll have to amend that as well. So we will be looking primarily at a lot of stormwater improvements as well as aesthetic improvements. We understand that this is what I would call a transitional zone because it abuts a residential neighborhood. We want to be good corporate neighbors and citizens, so I know Steve has been talking with some of the neighbors out there, and we will provide adequate buffers for anything we do out there. Currently, the property is cleared, I believe, almost to the property line, so enhancement with berms and landscape features or fencing for privacy purposes is very important. We understand to the neighbors, and we want to protect that. The land generally slopes from northwest to southeast, so this parcel is a little bit higher than those that are located on Arbania Road. So the idea was that if we could provide a little more elevation, that would protect them from noise and lights and just any disturbances that may be going on as part of the business. So we're here to answer any questions you may have. We understand this is just the first step to get the zoning approved, and then we understand that we need to come back and work with the planning board on more of the standards and details of the ordinances. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? All right. I do have a question. We discussed the age of the lumber yard. So 30 some odd years is Hammond, but in existence, it
Roughly,
sounds like,
I believe a little over 6 decades.
so a little over 60 years. What's the age of the houses that are adjacent? I apologize. This was a question for staff. I should have qualified that.
I can check that. It'll just take a second.
So while he's checking that, do you want to give us a little bit of your thought process behind asking that question?
Well, I asked that question because the engineer pointed out, and was quite right, that there are really no buffers, the kind of buffers that you would expect to see with a commercial development, and that's because the commercial development existed, prior to the zoning that required that. So, I guess I'm interested to know if the houses sort of grew in around the lumberyard, or if the lumberyard was developed in conjunction with the residential neighborhoods. Any new development would offer the opportunity to create buffering that doesn't exist now, not necessarily over the entirety of the site, but at least from the area that's being developed, which is good. I guess I'm really just asking because I'd like to know sort of what that timeline is, like who's doing what to whom.
Yeah, it looks like this one, 1950 is what the city record shows, and these are 60s and 70s along the backside of the Hammond site on Arbania.
Okay.
1967 here. 2017.
Okay, so some newer, some older, but sounds like some kind of maybe a concurrent development.
While the lumber company was
Yeah.
there, it looks like.
Yeah, okay.
Unless they were replacements. They may have replaced a home.
Okay, yeah, right. Other questions? All right, at this time, we would move to the public comment section of the hearing. Again, those rules that I read earlier apply here, and I'll briefly remind folks of some of the more pertinent ones. One, please state your name and address before speaking at the podium. Let us know if you're speaking on if you are speaking on behalf of someone else. Please let us know. Remember that we are limiting comments to 5 minutes, and that we are asking that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. Having said that, is there a motion to open public comment section of the hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? We've now opened the public comment section of the hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to address the board on this topic?
Hi, my name is Carol Lane. I live at 30 Arbania Street in Auburn. I also co-own 240 Poland Road, which is, that was built many years ago. It was like, the house is about 100 years old or more. But my house was built in the 60s, just for context. I'm speaking because I care about the quality of life in my neighborhood for myself and that of my neighbors, my family, and my tenants. Over the past few years, Hammond lumber has significantly affected my neighborhood in a negative way. In spite of the fact that I have voiced concerns with the planning board and my town councilors, nothing has been done to correct the issues. Starting in 2019, Hammond lumber cleared many acres of attractive woodland, which were a buffer between Hammond lumber and all of the houses on my street and also the houses on Poland Road. They also tore down the single-family house and cut old pine trees on the lot in question that they're talking about developing. When I used to walk my dogs on my street, I couldn't even see Hammond lumber because of the trees. Now every step of my street has a clear view of their warehouses and parking lots. The day that it happened for me was I heard chainsaws across from my house. I personally called Hammond lumber. I was so upset at what I was seeing with them clearing these trees that I ran out of my house and stopped their work crews until I could find out if what they were doing was approved. At the time it was happening, I emailed City Hall, I called. I was told that what Hammond lumber did was not in alignment with their approved site plan. In other words, if I understand correctly, they were violating ordinances by removing the wooded buffer area. I was told in an email dated May 9th of 2019 from Audrey Knight that Hammond was told to stop the clearing efforts until they had received approval on a revised site plan, which needs to address full tree planting and screen replacement. Nothing of the sort ever happened. When I followed up with emails to the planning office, I got no response, period. To give you a clear mental picture, when they removed the trees, acres of trees, many acres, they gave me a view not only of their warehouse and their parking lots, but also of the nearby rail yard, which previously had not been visible to me at all. Now when I sit in my living room, I can look out my window and see rail cars instead of trees. I can hear all of the industrial noise from the rail yard and from Hammond lumber's yard, and also traffic from Washington Street beyond. Everything is louder, uglier, and also brighter at night due to the now visible industrial lighting from Hammond lumber. They have created visual pollution, sound pollution, and light pollution. The work crews also, when I went out to stop them, they stated that they were trying to fill in some wet areas, which in my research turned out actually to be vernal pools. So now instead of spring peepers, I hear screeching rail cars and forklifts backing up. I hope this clearly illustrates the backdrop for my concern over Hammond lumber's current plans for the lot on Poland Road. How can we allow them to move forward with further development when they have not yet corrected the problems they created for my neighborhood in 2019? They have not replanted any trees, nor created any visual barrier to replace the one they removed, purposefully. They are simply not being good neighbors, and I ask you to consider enforcing their site plans before allowing any further development to move forward. That's my statement. I'm gonna just read something brief that my sister wrote, who co-owns.
I apologize, you have about 30 seconds left.
Oh, but this is for someone else. I'm reading on behalf of my sister, who is co-owner of 240 Poland Road. So I'm done. This is on behalf of Roberta Lane, 240 Poland Road.
Normally, it's the speaker themselves.
Oh, I thought you said something about if you're commenting on behalf of another person.
Right, we would ask, but we ask individuals to keep their comments to 5 minutes.
My
Seeing-
comments are
seeing-
done. Okay,
Seeing as you'd like to speak on behalf of someone else as well,
yes.
I'll ask you to please sit down, but I will
Okay.
ask the board,
Yep.
as is our purview, to
Okay.
see if we would like to allow that.
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to address the board?
Rihanna LaRose. I live on Bennett Avenue, which is on this map. And I'm going to reiterate some of the stuff Carol said. But in addition to this, you have a small industrial zone on this side that's been slowly encroaching on a beautiful suburban neighborhood, which is right in the Fairview School District. And just last year, they redid all of Poland Road, redid the sidewalks, walkability. This is what we keep talking about in the downtown. It's nice and safe. The traffic has kind of slowed down a little bit there. So now when you start in putting more industrial and keep encroaching on these neighborhoods, there is no buffer in there. No buffer at all. That's a beautiful neighborhood. And the more industrial, the closer you go to Fairview School, which is only one more block right there. Little kids, 5, 6 years old, can walk to school there. A gorgeous family could put a beautiful home in there. A beautiful family. And we keep talking about more and more housing. We have very few lots left. Here you're taking a prime lot and you're going to turn it industrial? That doesn't make any sense. That completely contradicts our comp plan, and I beg to differ. Future development, it is totally against future development. That doesn't make any sense at all. At all. Those homes were there before Hammond Lumber encroached. The original Hammond Lumber is way back down in this corner. And lot after lot, expanding. You're completely surrounded. This is suburban residential down over here too, just saying. So as they keep expanding, that makes no sense. I don't know about the petition, who's on your petition, but I can tell you, even Carol can speak up. Everybody that I have talked to that I know that lives in that adjacent neighborhood is thoroughly upset. Most of them couldn't be here today. They don't understand why an industrial needs to butt their property. The other thing is that she's right. Hammond Lumber bought that parcel, ripped that house down. They got that parcel in January of 2019. Within 2 months, they ripped this gorgeous farmhouse down completely, ripped all the trees completely down. And if it wasn't for her, Audrey Knight wouldn't even responded. Nobody responded. They were told over and over to stop cutting trees. They continue to cut trees for another month and a half. Now there's nothing left. They were told numerous times to replant and put a buffer in there. That neighborhood has been suffering since. It's extremely loud, it's wide open. They have still, this is 3 years in January, so we're almost 3.5 years. They still have not replanted those trees. They still have not. So there is no good faith as far as I'm concerned. Hammond Lumber cannot be trusted right now. I don't understand what their site was probably to buy that lot and change it and hope that they could expand their parking lot. But you got 3.5 years, you haven't even planted a single tree, and all you did was keep encroaching. That's ridiculous. There are people in that neighborhood that literally want to move out of there because they have no buffer. All they see is this wide open, disgusting parking lot, forklift trucks, hearing Washington Street over there, hearing the rail yard is 10 times louder than ever, just in the last couple of years. So I'm just saying, it doesn't match our comp plan, it doesn't match our future development, it is way too close to Fairview School. This is a gorgeous neighborhood, and we need housing. Once you turn that industrial, nobody's gonna go back and turn that back residential. You just lost a 1.75 acre gorgeous home. So, anyway.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board on this topic?
Marcel LaRose, only lived in the city for 66 and a half years. I own a parcel that is soon to be changed, or it's in the planning committees, whatever, to be changed from industrial, which is T5.1, I believe, Eric, is proposed change to general business. This borders the eastern part of this Hammond property. So at one end of the property, you want to go from 2 steps, and on the other end of the property that's already industrial, you want to go the other way and change it to general business. I mean, I'm confused. It's like you want it both ways at both ends of the properties. What about the residents that live here all their lives? I pay approximately $250 a week property tax to the City of Auburn on the properties that I own. I also am a businessman. I have a long-time business. It's been around since 1960, and it was bankrupt. They owed the city almost $35,000 in back taxes. When I bought it at auction, I had to pay it back. There was no forgiveness. There was no leeway. No, you got to pay it back now. And I did. And I resurrected this business. And it brings in a lot of people around here, surrounding areas throughout the state.
I apologize. I understand. I will actually pause your time since I'm speaking.
My 5 minutes is up?
No, your 5 minutes is not up. I understand your frustration with regard to the taxes. I would just ask you if you could please turn your remarks back to helping us understand your position with respect to this specific.
So the point is, at both ends, the 2 ends of this Hammond property, the city wants to change it from industrial to general business to accommodate a bunch of apartment units for more housing. Yet at the other end of the Hammond property, you want to change it from industrial to residential, whatever that new general business, residential. Anyhow, you're trying to change both ends of the property to accommodate 2 different contractors, to accommodate 2 different people, and it all affects the citizens in between. And that is not being looked at. That's not being considered. It's just the almighty dollar that's being considered here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board?
Timothy Allen, 194 Pride Road. The lot that we are talking about tonight was purchased by my grandfather in 1920. My family grew up there. I still live across the street. My grandfather was Peter Allen. He and my father started Peter Allen Lumber in 1931. I worked there for several years before I actually turned and worked for the City of Auburn for 35 years. My biggest concern with this whole thing is the sound buffer, the light buffer, and one of the biggest concerns I'll have is the fact that turning that from residential to industrial will allow tractor trailers to park in their yard and stay running all night long. We currently have an issue with them parking trucks in the yard. They come in, fortunately, the yard is so small at this point where they have the front barricaded off that only 1 truck can be there, but in the wintertime, it's not an issue, but in the summer when you have your windows open, you listen to diesel trucks idling for hours all night long. And if they expand this to industrial, then the city's ordinance can't be enforced because the ordinance refers only to vehicles in a residentially zoned area. And actually, that's an issue that the city needs to address with ordinances, and that they need to get rid of the saying residential. Matter of fact, let me read it. No person shall park a tractor trailer, truck, or railway engine in a residential zone within 500 feet of a residence. That should say, in any zone within 500 feet of a residence, with its motor running for a total of more than 20 minutes between the hours of 9 PM and 7 AM. And if we allow this property to be changed to from residential to industrial, then they will be able to park tractor trailers in the yard. I know that Hammond can do something with that by putting up signage and by putting gates to stop tractor trailers from having that spot to park. But if they don't, then we have no recourse because the current city ordinance is not properly written, which unfortunately, having worked for the city, I know that there's a lot of that issue with a lot of the ordinances. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board?
Mike Nyberg, 5 Albania Street. I'm also concerned about yet more encroachment upon what Hammond Lumber is doing. I understand Hammond Lumber is a business. They're trying to make things better for themselves. I understand that. But I'm concerned more with the topography, the drainage. I'm at the bottom of the hill. A lot of water gathers there because I'm at the bottom. I'm concerned also as well about the noise, the light, intrusiveness. I've talked to people about this. They've told me that they feel that it doesn't matter what you say. They're going to do what they want anyways because they have a lot of money, and I hope that's not true. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board?
Doug Snell, 321 Poland Road. I live right across from Hammond Lumber. I just want to echo what Mr. Allen had to say about the tractor-trailer activity. This has been going on for a few years now with trucks idling overnight, summer, winter, spring, fall. So I have concerns with that too, with trucks parking overnight. And Hammond Lumber started out as being a pretty good neighbor. But as time has gone on, as these other peoples have reflected, they've just gotten bigger and bigger and has not become a very good neighbor anymore. So Poland Road itself has a lot of issues. The paving turned out to be a disaster. The speed limit is 30 miles an hour. People do 45, 50 on a regular basis. I don't know. The quality of life in Auburn in general is not very good. It just keeps going down, down, down. Bad traffic patterns, bad this, bad that. That's it. Bye.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board?
Hi, my name is Caroline Tevz. I live at 269 Poland Road, directly across the street from this proposed change. And, you know, I moved to the neighborhood about 5 years ago, and that's before the house was torn down, and it was barely noticeable. Over the years, they've torn down the house. There's a lot of light noise. There's light shine directly into my home, and they have tractor trailer trucks sitting all weekend running. It's noisy. And to think that they're going to put a big, giant parking lot directly in front of my house that I can look at every day. I just ask you to think to yourself, you know, if this was your home and this was proposed to you and you had to look at this every single day, how would you feel? It's obviously not only an eyesore, but it's also going to lower our property values. Who wants to move into a house that stares at a parking lot? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the board? Seeing none, I'd bring it back to the board. One moment. Please wait. Please wait. I would like to bring it back to the board to allow Carol, and I apologize, I don't remember her last name, to see if that is something that the board would like to entertain, seeing that she had anticipated speaking on behalf of someone else as well. Are there any objections to that?
No.
Seeing no objections to that, I'd like to invite you to please come speak and read the letter on behalf of your sister.
My sister is much less verbose than I am, so it won't take long. Her name is Roberta Lane. She lives at 240 Poland Road, which I said again is a multi-unit. I own and live in a multi-unit on Poland Road, 2 houses down from Hammond Lumber. When I purchased the house, the Fairview neighborhood was considered to be very desirable residential neighborhood with a great elementary school. Things are changing fast, and I fear not in a good direction. Due to the unapproved and possibly illegal clear cutting done by Hammond Lumber, removing the buffer between their business and our neighborhood, the look of our neighborhood is much less appealing. Trees buffer neighbors from businesses for a reason. Who wants to look at big, ugly warehouses from their living room window? Just as noticeable is the noise pollution. Late at night, I used to listen to the lonely sound of the distant train whistles. Now the train whistle literally sounds like it's going through my backyard. I'm also concerned with the idea of increased tractor-trailer truck traffic through this neighborhood. If the neighborhood gets industrialized, my property will lose value as well. I hope Hammond Lumber will rebuild the buffers, and I understand it's required by code, and will plan to be a good and considerate neighbor. That's it.
Thank you. One last call. Is there anybody who wishes to address the board on this topic? Seeing none, I'd seek a motion to close the public input section of the hearing.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? The public input section of the hearing is now closed. I'm not sure I particularly heard many questions. Sometimes we hear lots of questions during public comment. However, there is a lot to think about. I'm sure that members of the planning board have questions now. Are there any questions for staff after public hearing?
A lot was made of the cutting that was done in 2019 that we don't have the 2019 site plan in here, but the I guess my question is that are they up to date? Is their site plan accurate, or is the cutting that they described not in their site plan?
So we did ask them to stop clearing at that point. We don't have, from reviewing the files, we don't have a current site plan that lays out buffering because the site has developed over time and been added onto. We've kind of been waiting for this submittal so that we can bring that site buffering up to a current standard. So as part of a site plan review that would happen if the zone changes, that's where we'd get a shot at buffering. How that interface happens with the neighborhood. So
the cutting was done on this proposed site and not on the old industrial lot.
And I believe there was some clearing done out behind these buildings as well that opened up views to uses that aren't on their site. Staff didn't feel that we could really address that absent some kind of a proposal to develop on the site. But I think if there's a site plan proposed, and we've been waiting for this proposed site plan that we anticipate after the zone change, that's our chance to really address buffering to modern standards.
Right, thank you.
I have a follow-up question to that. So there is no site plan for this property?
Not a current one to modern standards. We have the
yeah.
tax maps and we have some sketch plans, but we didn't find anything in the file that was a planning board approved.
Which is what I was trying to get at earlier when I made the comment that this thing was developed prior to the current standards with regard to buffering. So help me understand, if you were not asking Hammond Lumber to stop cutting trees pursuant to a violation in conjunction with a site plan, why was staff asking Hammond to stop cutting?
Because when we inquired about it, at the time they really didn't have any specific plans that they let us become aware of at that point that they were clearing to try to clean up the site overall. We explained to them the neighbors' concerns, and they had agreed to not cut until they proposed something for land use, but at that point they had already cleared the majority of the lot.
So was staff asking, Was it a request from staff, or was it a demand pursuant to some local ordinance?
So it was a request from staff that if they are doing the clearing in anticipation of some future development, they really need to stop until we get a site plan. And they agreed to stop clearing. But we didn't
Well, they
have a
agreed to
site
stop once they had cut everything down.
Yeah, most of it, I don't know if they would have gone further or not. I can't answer that.
Okay. Yeah, so 2019. So this is clearly after the Woodbury Heights issue. And I think you probably remember this. And if I remember correctly, we actually, was there an ordinance change, I believe, with regard to that, stating such a clearing of trees was in order to, I'm remembering now. The planning board, I believe, and I'm gonna have to go find this. If I remember correctly, there's language that states that you should not be clearing in order to facilitate a development unless it is part of the approval for that development.
Correct. Clearing for development should be done as part of that approval. And the planning board required some really stringent, fairly expensive replantings, I think, to try to make it clear that what was done on that project was not acceptable.
Right, and I remember our discussion revolving around trying to actually remember that for the future, that if clearing was done in order to facilitate development, it was done in absentia of a site plan, then it was done inappropriately. I'm trying to figure out, because we're hearing that, we heard from several people that they spoke to staff, and it was their understanding that staff spoke to Hammond and told Hammond to stop cutting. I'm trying to figure out,
Did they keep cutting? Or
did they keep cutting? Why were they being asked to not cut? Was it because there was an ordinance? It sounds like staff asked them to stop. Am I understanding this?
Yep.
Staff asked them to stop because it would seem that cutting and then bringing forth a development would imply that the cutting was done in order to facilitate the development.
Yes.
And that's clearly prohibited.
Yep. So, and I think, they've heard tonight that there's going to be, if there is an eventual development of this parcel, there's going to be a really strong focus on bringing back better buffers for the site.
Yeah, I can't speak for the board, but I would anticipate that it would be probably a condition of approval, not even part of a plan.
So I guess to that point, I wonder, why do we have to do this now?
It's an excellent question.
I mean, if there is no plan, why do we have to make this change now? I would much rather see a plan that we could actually comment on before making the zone change.
I'm in agreement with Matt.
In looking at the map, I think someone could make the argument that it would be reasonable to entertain the zone change because of it being backed by or surrounded on two sides by industrial. I think someone could also very easily make the argument that if it appears that this is being rezoned, it is under the ownership of the adjacent parcel owner. To think that it is simply being rezoned to promote industry would be a little foolhardy to this promoting industry in the general sense.
I think that, I don't have the exact verbatim, but it was something to the effect of increased visibility, right, of Hammond in and of itself. That's what I think I remember hearing.
Eric? I know one of the schematics shows a parking lot. I was just trying to find that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the agenda, it's in the plan. I think it's the other one, Eric. Next page. Yep.
So clearly, I think that they're considering or eventually proposing a parking lot, and they mentioned that tonight as well.
I don't see any trees or buffer.
Yeah, and I think that's what we tried to make clear, is that this process is a request for the zone change. They'd really have to come back with something much more detailed for an actual site plan
Okay.
approval. We can't do conditional rezonings, and it really, they don't have a mechanism to have the council consider the zone change and then come back to you with a plan based on the industrial standard without having the zone change done ahead of the site plan. It would be difficult for them to propose a site plan, and very risky, I think, to put the engineering money into it in an area that isn't already zoned for what they intend to use it for.
2 months ago, we passed a development that seemed there was a lot of planning done for a zone that didn't exist yet. Up on on Court Street there.
With
But
a
the-
lot of greenery,
But the zoning was in place when you considered that plan.
but not when
Not
they
the
made
zoning that
that
could fit that
plan.
many people, not at that density.
If it was 550 Court Street, when that project came to you, the zoning had already been approved by the council.
What I'm saying is
That's
they had a
changed.
site plan that seemed that it was developed before that zone had been changed.
Yep, no, I think they took some risk, and then they have here too. I mean, they've started to develop a plan here that you can see.
Yeah.
But there's not a mechanism for you to consider a plan and approve it if the zoning doesn't allow it, is the point I'm trying to make.
Eric, could you go back to the parcel viewer and put the terrain layer on? I just want to make sure that we know what was cleared, because there is a little buffer there, but it's clearly not what was described for what it was in the past.
Yeah, this is 2018. Looks like there were some trees beside the farmhouse, but a lot of it was cleared. And this was cleared as well.
All of those trees are gone. If you look at Google Images.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
this is before the clearing, just to look at what it looked
Yep.
like.
And then were there some on the main property that were also removed?
I think there were some back here that were removed.
Oh, another question. Somebody had said something that it was in industrial and general business. Is this parcel part of two different zones?
So go to the zoning. So over here was changed from industrial to T51 zoning.
Yeah.
This parcel. And then the remainder of that was already general business and was changed to T51. Over here, this proposal is proposing that the residential zone be changed to industrial. So I think it was that. On opposite ends, there's been different changes proposed.
So Eric, I put the imagery hybrid layer on, and it seems to be a lot more current than the one that you pulled up. It has like most of that buffer gone.
And you're on the city's WebGIS?
Yes.
So are you under the
I'm
advanced
probably
parcel
on-
viewer or the public parcel viewer?
I'm
There's
probably
no
on a
parcel
different
viewer.
viewer. The
Second.
best aerial I have is 2018 on this viewer. Is that the advanced viewer?
No, he's utilizing the public parcel viewer here. I will.
It looks more like the Google map.
Right-hand side at the top icon with the eye. Yep, right there.
Yeah, no, left.
Oh,
2 over.
I'm sorry, 2 over to the
The
left.
4
yeah.
dot waffle thing.
Okay, it's probably pulling the Google imagery then.
Down a page. That's the one that I found that's most current.
We just had a flyover the beginning of March that will be beginning of April rather, that will become available soon.
So there you can see the difference.
Yep, there is a big difference.
Does that look current?
I don't know the answer to that.
All along Armenia, all those trees are gone. Yes.
Those
And
trees
then
as
to the
well?
right, that cut over to the right, all those trees are gone.
Okay.
I literally stood there and told the men they could not cut the trees lining my street, but everything, literally like 5 trees. I said, you're not cutting those. They cut everything beside that. There is no buffer.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. We just need to know if that is current to the ground conditions. I understand there's some emotion around it. Okay, well, you know, an issue here is, I'll tell you, having been on the planning board for a long time, when you look at it with just the zoning overlay, it's the kind of change that makes sense. I would not have anticipated a lot of pushback on it. And it sounds like the pushback that we're getting is really having to do with a fear as to what Hammond is going to do with that property, given what they've done with their current property. So, this is a difficult one. We're being asked about a zoning map amendment, but it's clear that in amending the zone, we will have something else come before us. I mean, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just trying to make it very clear that this is the situation we're
So
in.
I got a question for Eric. My understanding is then if it's not rezoned, a new site plan won't be put forth.
That's my guess.
Therefore, there wouldn't be any way for recovery of a buffer without Hammond just doing it out of.
Right, yeah, unless they propose some other improvement on the site that triggered a review and compliance with the site plan standard.
And I don't want to make this like a trial thing about Hammond Lumber and what they've done or whatever. I just want to make sure I have all the facts and no judgment or anything like that.
And it could be that it's not exactly matching parcel boundary lines, that what the board recommends, if they chose to approve part of it, may not be, it may leave room in the residential zone for additional buffering.
So if we do hypothetically change the zone, nothing can happen on that property without coming to the board first?
Nothing significant. I think a parking lot of this scale or any new buildings will come back to the board.
When you say significant, sorry.
If that was industrial and it was not connected to the larger project, let's say they got the zone changed and said, I don't want to deal with that site anymore, we're going to sell it. Somebody else could come in and propose an industrial use less than 10,000 square feet, and it would be reviewed as a separate project at a staff level. But if it's an amendment to Hammond's site plan, they're a larger overall project. That'll be a site location of development plan amendment. We heard tonight they have an existing permit and would come back to the board for site plan review.
Did you say I'm sorry, did you say they had an existing permit?
They have an existing, what we've heard tonight is they have an existing state site location of development permit.
So are you saying that we could actually impose buffer requirements on the main site as well as this smaller parcel if they came back?
I think that's what it would take to provide some of the screening that has been removed. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just wondering, if they come back for something on just that parcel, then we can't ask them to do anything
As
on
part
the
of the,
main.
if it was a separate development totally disconnected from Hammond, then yeah, I think
Which they could do,
somebody could, yeah.
but they couldn't just build a parking lot.
If it's amending the larger Hammond site plan, then it'll be an amendment to that state site location of development permit and an amendment to a locally approved site plan.
Okay.
So I'm just going to pivot here real quick and just make sure I understand this. So if we do change the zoning to industrial, there are allotted uses within industrial, and as such, those permitted uses could be employed without coming to the planning board. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
If they're permitted use less than 10,000 square feet, they could. They're still subject to site plan review and buffering standards, though, at a staff level.
So, sorry, if we do change this, it wouldn't, they would still have those trucks idling in the parking lot? Like, if it's not zoned right now, it's rural residential right now? What is it?
Suburban. Yep.
Suburban. So how are these trucks sitting there overnight idling?
I suspect that they're on the existing industrial portions of the site, because there is no parking lot on this site.
Right.
And while we're semi on that topic, I would like to address Mr. Allen's concerns about if we do change the zoning, that they would be able to, or the city would not be able to enforce more. So I guess my concern is them doing more with what they already have. If we even change the zoning, which I know we have to do, to come back and enforce those buffering strips, if we want to give the citizens of that neighborhood some of that stuff back. But I don't know what we could do with, and Mr. Allen made a very good point of maybe perhaps getting that ordinance changed citywide, no
Or
matter
putting-
what on zoning.
Putting gates up.
And I don't think that's a lot necessarily to ask for.
We don't have to ask city. We can just say tonight we can say we're gonna initiate this zoning amendment.
Because it is
So we can do it.
Right, and I would like to, I guess, see that ordinance change
Yeah.
for, say,
I think we should come back to that one.
okay. Yeah, I know it's kind of like going back and forth, but I
it's-
just, well, we're semi-talking about it, and without going to left field, to come back to recognize those concerns of the public.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely worth looking at. I want to jump in and say, I am hearing some things being conflated, and it's difficult to not conflate them. Site plan from Hammond Lumber, rezoning. The planning board needs to make the determination as to whether or not it makes sense for that parcel to be industrial or not, without speculation as to what goes on it, because it very well could be a Hammond Lumber parking lot. It could be a storage building. It could be anything else owned by Hammond Lumber. It's its own parcel. It could equally be any one of a dozen other uses allowed in the industrial zone. And so tonight is not the night that we question whether or not Hammond Lumber has done something correctly, or how we are going to enforce buffers that were removed. The question for the board is, does it make sense for that lot to be industrial? Because the reality is, we could fall into the trap of conflating the ideas that, well, if we rezone it, then Hammond has to come to us, and then we get to amend the site plan. That's a possibility. It's not like a must. It's not a requirement. If we rezone that to industrial, the only thing that we can ensure that we've done is allowed for any permitted industrial uses to go there, and knowing that if it's a small enough use, and it doesn't come before the board, and if it's a large enough use that's going to kick in site plan review, then it'll come before us. Speculating beyond that, I think, is going to get us in trouble into thinking that we can do something in order to make a further change. There's no guarantee that that further change happens. So, and so I apologize for stepping in here and kind of wagging my finger. I just think we need to pull back from that idea that, like, well, if we do this, then it means we can do the following things. The reality is, if we do this, it means that lot is now industrial, and any allowed industrial uses could be put on that lot, and anything that's special exception in the industrial zone would have to come before us. Nothing more, nothing less. That's what we've done, and so that's the discussion I think we really need to be focused on.
So I guess, I mean, I appreciate that. I realize that that's the case, and so the question I ask is, if it's not Hammond Lumber, is creating, like, what are we doing to that neighborhood, right? Hammond Lumber is already there, but if it's not Hammond Lumber, we're creating additional industrial businesses in what is essentially a residential neighborhood.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm hearing Evan say,
Yeah.
that if we change it to an industrial zone, then it's then permitted for industrial uses, right?
Yeah, we're not rezoning this. Hammond Lumber owns the lot. This is not a rezoning to allow Hammond Lumber to do something. The reality is Hammond Lumber owns the lot, and they will be able to do something with it, right? But what we are doing is rezoning a lot. We cannot guarantee who will own it tomorrow. We cannot guarantee what they will do with it tomorrow. Well, we can guarantee that if we rezone it, it will be rezoned industrial, and all allowed uses with industrial will be allowed on that lot, and special exception uses will come before us. We are either okay with that, and we believe that's a good plan and a good idea, and that fits in this lot, or we believe that doesn't. But fundamentally, that's separate from Hammond Lumber's ownership of the parcel. Yes.
Sorry. I'd just like to inject something here. This is under a Site Location of Development Act permit. This parcel, even though it was not part of the original parcel, is now included with that, will be included with that permit because it's under the same ownership. It's called Common Scheme of Development. So any activity that's done on that lot requires it to go back for a state permit, which I believe the City of Auburn is the facilitator, has delegated review of that. So any change that comes to that lot is required to come back to the city because it's under a state permit. So
Is that because it's under a state permit
Site location.
pursuant to its ownership by Hammond?
Yes.
So you can guarantee that Hammond will own that parcel in however many years?
If Hammond breaks away, it has to do so through the state permit. The next permittee would have to have a transfer of ownership, which the city would be notified of that change. Hammond Lumber, I can guarantee you, has no...
Look, I guess what I'm saying is, I hear you. We're being asked to rezone a parcel into the industrial zone.
Right. And I would just like to inject one thing. I mentioned this word before. I think it's important to recognize that Hammond Lumber, its location, because it's industrial against the suburban, is really a transitional parcel. And one of the questions I had with Steve just a few minutes ago is, we are willing to offer a buffer, and we'll do so at the site plan. We understand, we've heard tonight, we've heard prior to this meeting, the neighbors' concerns of buffers. I understand it's not the zoning change that gets done with. It is at the site plan process. We have, on our part, if I look at our development plan that we've generated, we've maintained 100-foot separation between the edge of that development and the property line of the abutters.
Okay, thank you.
So I actually have a question
Yes.
for staff, Eric. So I'm not familiar with whatever he just cited. But what I think I heard was, through the state, they purchased that land, and now that land is now some sort of like consortium with Hammond Lumber, right? And if they do anything to that lot, then they have to come before us for site review. So this, to me, is a moot point at this point in time if you're referencing that. So then if you have to come before us, because it's now a part of whatever umbrella you're a part of because of the state, and you
Exactly.
still have to, then I
Right.
guess I'm clear.
Correct. Because we are now, this parcel will be attached to the Hammond Lumber total entity parcel. It's now part of the permit. When we come in for a site plan revision,
No. So if we choose, and this is where I need like staff help, if we choose not to move forward with this zoning, and now it then defaults to whatever this gentleman is saying, then when they choose to make a site plan and make a change to that lot, they still have to come before us, correct?
If Hammond Lumber chooses to. Yeah, it
If we
becomes
choose
part of
not
that
to change the
permit.
zoning, and it stays as it is today, and then it then defaults under this other umbrella he's talking about, then they're making a change to that lot, they have to come before us, correct?
I don't think that this has been pulled into the permit yet. I think that happens if they propose development that is within the common scheme of Hammond Lumber.
correct.
So they could sell this to you tomorrow, and you could develop it under whatever zoning
Suburban or
exists,
industrial.
depending
whatever
on what
we choose.
exists.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I apologize. I don't want us to enter into a debate with an applicant, I guess is what's going on. So I guess that's the point. It's not like, the only guarantee is that we either, when it's all said and done, what public needs to know is we don't make the decision, city council does. They can make whatever decision they would like regardless of what we say tonight. That's another thing that people need to understand. There's no ordinance that says the city council shall act in accordance with recommendation of the planning board. The only guarantee when we're done with this is that the planning board has said, yes, we are okay with it being industrial and knowing that any industrial use could go there, or no, we're not okay with it being industrial, and we believe that it best fits the suburban residential zone. That's.
I think the only other piece to that is you could recommend a portion of the parcel and not all the way up to the back of the other residences, if that was something that you wanted to guarantee that the industrial uses never get right up to the setback line.
So the question is, so how do people feel about this as an industrial lot?
If that proposal to set back, say, 100 feet from the other property lots, and so that section stayed suburban residential, would that affect them being able to use that suburban residential land in their site plan to put in a buffer? Because that would be kind of an important area for the buffer to exist.
The buffer could be in either portion of the parcel.
So the site plan, okay, so the site plan could be over two different zones.
Are we talking about site planning, or are we talking about zoning?
So what I was
So the
suggesting-
zone, so if we were to propose that we change the zone to industrial all but up to 100 feet within the property lines of the abutting neighbors, would that remove that 100 feet that we just kept suburban residential from being able to be used in a site plan that they were hypothetically to come to us with to increase buffering? Like, could they, with their site plan, be able to go over two zones if they were trying to fix the buffering issue?
And the buffer could be planted in either portion. 100 feet uses a lot of that parcel, but that's the example that you used. But the buffer could be placed in either portion of the zone, either portion of the property.
That's my question. Thanks.
So can I ask a quick question to what Riley was saying? How would we get a buffer? I guess my question is, if you kept part of that suburban residential and the other part industrial, how would you ensure that, and say they did nothing with that lot whatsoever?
So I don't think we get one if that happens. It's really if they come back for some kind of a site plan approval.
Okay.
This is why I'm saying it's whether or not whether or not we feel it conforms to an industrial or a suburban residential, because everything else is speculation.
Right. Well, I am not in favor of moving this lot to industrial zoning, so I'll just share my opinion.
Can you share why? Is there a particular reason why?
I think you articulated it, that, on the surface, it appeared to be what I'd heard earlier today, like a transitional lot. But when, you look at it a little bit further and how it does abut the suburban residential neighborhoods, I think there is an impact to it. And I think when you so closely change an industrial lot, an acre towards a neighborhood, I think that's impactful.
I definitely agree. I feel like it is a very, I lived on Pride Road for probably 5 years when I was a kid, so maybe 3 years, anyway, but so it's very much a neighborhood, and I used to obviously go towards that Hammond lumber all the time, but it wasn't as big as it is now, but the neighborhoods are still neighborhoods. So I just feel like, taking away those buffers, all those trees, I mean, you have an industrial business, but you have to understand that it's in a residential neighborhood. You're surrounded by residentials. I just think until I see a site plan of a lot of greenery.
I mean, I'll also add that I think from planning and city planning and development and housing development point of view, it doesn't make sense because it is actually it's encroaching, it's reducing the amount of buildable area as we head toward city center, right? It's an encroachment of the industrial district toward city center and into an existing buildable area.
My conviction is not quite as strong as everyone else's, I believe. I actually see a strong argument for placing it in industrial. It's a residential lot that's bordered on two sides by an industrial use. We're in a different place, I would say. Well, under a form-based code, we're talking over an acre. This could actually represent 5 to 6 single-family homes, if split correctly, and that would be a wonderful infill. I don't see it being infilled with the residential properties, given its proximity to with residential homes, given its proximity to Hammond. And so I think to myself, if it is not a lot that is likely to be developed residentially, but we choose not to zone it to industrial, it essentially just sits as an open, unused lot. So I can absolutely understand an argument for saying that in this particular case, it makes sense to change it to an industrial zone. However, that adds over an acre of industrial property directly adjacent to residential homes. So I guess
So, Mr. Chair,
I'm quite torn on this one, yes.
can I make a motion?
You may.
I would like to make a motion against the against the rezoning proposal in front of us.
So you would forward a recommendation that the city council not rezone,
Yep, for the reasons already stated.
being,
I can't remember exactly the wording that Ms. LeBlanc had, and also that it's an encroachment of the industrial into existing residential area.
encroachment into industrial, into residential area, and you had said, if it's on the public I want it to be on the public record if Matt's including it.
You want me to repeat myself?
No, just in brief, so that everyone understands and it's on the public record because these things are being recorded.
It's encroaching upon residential neighborhoods.
Okay. So there's a motion with justification, the motion being to recommend that city council not rezone the property. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Well, I think it's difficult. In my heart of hearts, I believe it probably should be industrial. I won't lie, given where it is, but it's difficult to say that after hearing the concerns of the neighbors, understanding that the previous industrial property was buffered. Given a good buffer, it seems like it was perhaps not the worst neighbor to have as an industrial use. So I feel reluctant, but then I feel torn to say, well, if I believe it should be industrial and the issue is buffers, then I need to take care of that in two different things. So that's what I'm going to add to that.
Well, if it were to be rezoned industrial and it wasn't, say, Hammond, again, not to do the hypothetical that Hammond still owns it, say another company owns it, it would still, if they were to do anything on it, go to the city, that would then require buffers be put in place.
Only
Right.
if they trigger a special exception site plan review at that point. And then the planning board would have no ability to extend that buffer beyond that single parcel onto Hammond's property if Hammond wasn't the one coming in front of us.
So
It's part of a larger site plan.
if I could just clarify, if it was a smaller project separate from Hammond, we would still apply the buffering standard at a staff level?
Correct.
If it
But it
didn't
would be
trigger.
applied only to that parcel.
Yes.
And it would not affect any of the buffering that we've heard about on other parts of the property. I just want to make that clear. Yeah. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a vote. Again, the motion is to forward a recommendation that the city council not adopt the change. So an affirmative on this motion says you want to leave it as is, just so everyone understands, yes? Okay,
Yes.
no questions, all right. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes 5-2. For the public, so that you understand next steps, this recommendation will go in front of the city council. If you have strong conviction, and it sounds like you all do, I suggest that you go to the city council. What the planning board has done is forwarded a specific recommendation as is required by local ordinance. The city council will make a decision. It's important for everyone to understand that the city council may make any decision they deem to be appropriate after having considered the recommendation of the planning board. But there's nothing that requires them to follow recommendations. So I want members of the public to just recognize that it didn't end here. Clearly people had strong conviction about this. I would feel remiss letting people go thinking that the process is done. All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing, special exception for 499 kilowatt electric generation by Novel Energy Solutions.
Yep.
The solar PV project is located on Route 202, parcel ID number 053-004, with project access on Washington Street. The current zoning is agriculture and resource protection. This project is proposed pursuant to Chapter 60, Article 16, Division 2 and 3, Article 4, Division 2, and Article 18. This proposed site will be constructed to produce just less than half a megawatt, or 499 kilowatts, of electric generation. Again, we will conduct this public hearing in the same manner that we conducted the last. Is staff ready to give their report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this is close enough. So the proposal, as the chairman just said, is a solar garden that is about less than half a megawatt, a little less. It's going to be 499 kilowatts of energy generated. It is on Washington Street. The parcel, it will be only taking up a small portion of the parcel. So if you were to look, maybe you can see a map in a minute, but if you were to look at the parcel itself, you would see that the parcel itself is actually it's larger than the area leased here. So the leased area only takes up a small portion to the side of the parcel, not seeming to clear, not clearing any of the trees around it. So if you were to look at it on a map, then you would see trees lining the parcel. This solar garden does not encroach into those trees. So we reviewed this under a few different chapters, and ordinance and articles. We reviewed it under the ag zone because that's where the parcel is sitting. Solar gardens can be approved as special exception within the ag zone, so it is an approved use if the planning board decides to put it forward. It has also met, we also believe it's met the requirements for solar energy generating dual use systems. That's the other article that we reviewed it with. So that would be, and we also are looking at site plan review special exception. So that's what we're doing today, and that's how we evaluated this. So in the staff report, I wrote it so you can actually see all of the different like word for word provisions in the ordinance as they pertain to this project. And against that, I wrote in what the applicant has provided as an answer to that ordinance requirement. So the way that it will look, the site will have a 6-foot high chain link fence with 3 strands of barbed wire lining the top. Existing screening will reduce visual impact of the project with additional vegetation. With additional vegetation planted to increase visual appeal and add stormwater purification, soil stabilization, and water quality. There will be the fence will have a wildlife path underneath. There will be some space to allow for critters to come and go. And the area will be seeded with conservation mix and pollinator mix. And that is that's for sedimentation, erosion control, stormwater treatment, and also just for treatment of the unbuilt areas. That's what the proposal is. The applicant has passed a technical screening, but staff is recommending that in order to approve this, that they would also need to the actual section. They would need to, before commencing construction, the city must receive the following documents. We recommend that they receive a certificate of completion, a signed interconnection agreement, The project will be moved into the existing grid from CMP is what that agreement will come from. A customer net energy billing agreement as well. The project also falls within the airport area of influence. So another condition that staff recommends is that we receive a determination of no hazard from the FAA. And as for maintenance and decommissioning at the end of the site, or at the end of the project, they have submitted a decommissioning plan, including removing all panels, removing the structures, and restabilizing the area. Another thing I'll bring up is that for solar, kind of jumping around, sorry about that. For solar projects in the ag zone, they must be, at this point, I think there's an ordinance, right? To keep the solar projects under
1%.
1%, yep.
Okay. So in a little box, you can see that the board has reviewed a few solar projects in the past. We've had one that has been 18.9 acres, another that has been 35 acres, another 18 acres, last one 14.6 acres, and this one is 5.26 acres. And that altogether is 91.76 acres total of solar generating gardens within the ag zone in Auburn. The limit before the process gets to be more complicated is 200 acres, so we're a little bit less than halfway to that mark. The solar farm is not proposed on, it is not on prime farmland, as soils of statewide significance. Basically what that means is soils that have been determined to have the right makeup to produce for agriculture. And sorry. So also the other recommendations is before commencing construction, the city must receive solar decommissioning permit reviewed by MDEP, Department of Environmental Protection. They also have, one of the requirements for the ordinance is that they provide an as-built map to see all the mechanisms of shutting down the system in the case of an emergency. We suggest that they provide us with, the planning board, with an updated plan with all of those locations clearly marked prior to the start of construction. So that's one of our suggested conditions. And we also suggest as a condition that the applicant will provide a more detailed vegetation maintenance and management plan. Right now, the management and vegetation maintenance is that there will be proactive weed identification and maintenance, occasional checkups, constant off-site monitoring, which if there's any alert that arises, they will deal with that in one business day. And also they have for the lighting, they proposed a light that will be on 24 hours a day at the front gate with signage to assist anyone who might be there during an emergency. The staff also recommends that there might be a motion sensor for that light instead of it being on 24 hours. And I think, and also it can be be implemented without detriment to city resources.
Questions for staff?
I have kind of a silly question. What's a solar garden?
Solar farm, I think it's, right, is it kind of interchangeable?
Yeah, I think it's being referred to as a solar garden, but I think it's interchangeable.
I think it's maybe, I was thinking about it as maybe a small solar farm.
I think somebody's just getting cute.
Other questions?
The only question I have is, does this go along with, or is the staff's opinion that this goes along with the comp plan, the thoughts of the Washington Gateway to downtown, if proposed?
Yeah, so it's south of the Turnpike exit. There's no proposal in this area to change from ag zone in the comp plan on Washington Street, I don't believe, but from the Turnpike exit in is where the majority of changes are proposed.
Eric, I had a question. That dark line we're seeing, is that the New Gloucester town line?
This line
Yeah.
is here,
Okay.
yep. And the airport area of influence is what triggers review by the airport, and for solar projects, the FAA. This parcel is partially in the 5-mile
Gotcha.
airport area of influence, but it's right near the perimeter. We've spoken with the airport manager. He doesn't anticipate any issues, but we need that sign off.
The entire site is within the area of influence too.
Yeah, the entire leased area.
The entire solar farm would be within that area. Yeah.
The applicant has been in contact with the airport manager, and I believe they're working on that right now.
Other questions? Seeing none, is the applicant or representative of the applicant here tonight?
Hi, good evening. You guys have been through a night, so I'll make this quick. My name is Brittany Krebsbach. I'm here representing Novel tonight. Flew all the way from Minnesota. You guys have a beautiful town. I had a beautiful drive here from Portland, so great way to kind of end my night. But yes, proposing a approximately 0.5 megawatt solar farm here. Just to go over the conditions, yes, I have been in contact with the airport manager. The person that provides FAA approval is out of town until May 10th on vacation, so we'll get that wrapped up. Easy condition of approval. The MDEP decommissioning plan, we've done several of those for other farms, and MDEP's been great to work with, so we'll be sure to grab that decommissioning plan, and the plan was also provided in the review package. So if there's any issues with that, happy to discuss. And then the lighting is actually, the gate lighting actually isn't even necessary, so I've already talked to my maintenance team, and they've agreed that it's not needed, and we could just go without it altogether, and if anyone needs to drive to the site for safety reasons, they'll bring their own lighting. So, but yeah, so just to cover some of those right after we chatted about them, I just want to thank your planning team too. They've been super responsive and helpful through this application process. Really quick background about Novel. We have about 250 megawatts, probably more by this point, of solar gardens or solar farms. The term is interchangeable, across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, now Maine, etc. We're founded by 5th-generation farmers from a small town called St. Charles in Minnesota. So it's really cool to work with them side by side of other farmers and small business owners and such to bring solar and clean energy to the communities and the surrounding. So yeah, working with CMP, we're very familiar with that process too, although can be a slow one. No worries about providing the IA and things like that as a condition of approval. The one thing I did want to note is that the certification of completeness actually isn't provided until construction has been completed. So I do not believe that is a legitimate condition for commencing construction, if that makes sense. So that is the only point we wanted to kind of raise as far as the staff report conditions of approval.
Can you please repeat specifically which one that is?
Yes, it's under the same one. What number is that, Catherine?
Number 2.
Item 2, so condition 2 under the conditions of approval. Just the certification of completeness, that is the only item within item number 2 we have an issue with.
So maybe an update could be that, like, prior to use or prior to
energization or, something like that. But an IA, as our interconnection agreement, that's a common condition of approval that we have no problem meeting.
What was the term you just used?
Energization. So like before the energy would be put onto the grid and the site would be in use and we'd really be making any money off of it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, I won't waste any more of your time. If you have questions, that's great, but we really look forward to being good neighbors. There's some great existing vegetation, but of course, we're always welcome to talk about more screening. It seems like that's a pretty emotional topic tonight in your community, so always happy to provide more in shrubs, trees, whatever it might be, but this is pretty far set back. I think I measured it's over 500-600 feet from even a resident across the way there, and then in the west and south, it has great existing screening, and like Catherine mentioned, we're not removing any existing trees. It's in a great ag undeveloped site, so.
Thanks. Any questions? Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you all.
At this point, we'll go to public input. We'll utilize the same rules that we used for the 2 previous hearings. I noticed that the folks that are still here were here during those times, so if you have a question, please ask, but I'll assume you remember them. So at this point, seek a motion to open the public input section of the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? We've now opened the public input section of the hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to address the board on this topic? Seeing none, I'd seek a motion to close the public input section of the hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor? We'll move on to discussion and deliberation. I don't know. I like the idea of these things, and this one was actually cited quite well compared to some of the others that we've seen. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think when we make the motion, we just need to amend or add another condition which strikes the COC and rephrases when it should be required. So.
Could we just add upon energization on the back, like right behind it?
I think you probably could. Yep.
It looks like we can also get rid of the lighting condition at the very bottom.
Okay.
Eric, is there a Knox box requirement? Sorry.
I apologize. Before, and we would get rid of that because?
Because Brittany, I think, just said that they don't actually need the lighting at all at the front gate. You could rephrase it as no lighting. Sorry.
I guess it's really great that they don't need it, but if we don't want it, I think it should remain as a condition to ensure that it doesn't happen if that's something that we don't want.
The condition right now is that it's at a motion sensor, so that's.
Why would somebody need to be there? Like, do things happen at nighttime where? I mean, just to have a motion wouldn't be terrible. I'm just, you know what I mean?
But-
Like, to have a motion light wouldn't be terrible.
So, Mr. Chair, if I
I'm sure it's
understand
solar powered.
your point, is that if we leave the condition, if they decide to build a light, we still have the condition.
Mm-hmm.
And if we remove the condition and then decide to build a light, yeah.
And I apologize, Mr. Daigle, for interrupting.
I just asked if there's a Knox box requirement for that for fire department access.
There is, and that location will be shown on that plan that also shows how to kill the connection to the grid of the
That's
entire
just my
site.
biggest concern.
Any other discussion? If there's no more discussion, I would expect a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the development of parcel ID 053-004 during the lease period for a 599 kilowatt solar array covering approximately 19 acres with the following conditions. Before construction, the city must receive a determination of no hazard from the FAA. Before commencing construction, the city must receive the following documents: a certificate of completion upon energization, signed interconnection agreement from CMP, and a customer net energy billing agreement. Before commencing construction, the city must receive the solar decommissioning permit reviewed by MDEP. An updated plan providing means of shutting down the solar energy generating system will be provided before construction and will be marked on-site as built. The applicant will provide a more detailed vegetation maintenance and management plan for the staff review prior to construction. And if there is lighting at the front gate, it will have a motion sensor and not be on unless there's activity at the site.
Second.
Discussion?
So I have one question. Are we dealing with 499 kilowatts? Yeah, 499 kilowatts or 599? 499? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to amend the number from 599 to 499.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? None being, motion to amend to reflect 499 instead of 599 as written. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is amended. The main motion has now been amended to read 499 instead of 599. Any additional discussion? My question for staff, as read, does staff understand condition 2 to mean that the applicant can provide that COC prior to energization, what a weird word, all right? Energization, but that it not be required prior to construction? Okay, staff, great. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a vote. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? None being, motion carries unanimously. All right, the next item on the agenda is public comment. At this time, we would invite members of the public to address the board using the same rules as public comment section of the public hearings. That is to say, name and address in 5 minutes. Does anyone wish to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 6, planning board items for discussion. I would like to bring up Mr. Daigle's earlier discussion with regard to parking of idling commercial vehicles. So I think that was a good, and my question to you is, do you feel conviction such that you would ask the board to initiate a zoning amendment change?
I would. I think it's a very reasonable thing to ask citywide of anything that abuts residential properties. I mean, we've seen every meeting somebody concerned about light, noise, and everything. I don't think that's a very difficult change, and I've been trying to think of specific properties that it could be, but I don't think that that's a terrible ordinance amendment to make.
Do you have the specific ordinance number?
We can find it. I don't have it. I can try to find it while you're talking through it if you want, or we can bring it back with, what that would look like if we added commercial, applying it to commercial zones as well. We could show what that would look like, whether or not there would be any areas left to.
Yeah, I mean,
run a vehicle.
I get that some places it may not be possible, like big industrial businesses, but so I guess maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea.
I think we can give you the information so you can consider it and decide which way you want to go.
Yeah, I hear your concern. I'm not sure it's necessarily applicable within the commercial zone. I think it's an issue here because of their use of trucks, but
I just feel like there's a lot of options other than next to residentials too. Like, I
Yeah.
agree, like, that they shouldn't.
So would the board like to start a zoning amendment process tonight by motion, or would we like to ask staff to sort of workshop what that looks like first?
I'd favor the latter.
The latter?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
And I mean, I'd be interested in looking at, I mean, maybe we take zoning out of it and we put residence. We just use, within 500 feet of a residence, for example, then the zone is irrelevant. So if-
Right, and that would protect, the people essentially, so.
Right.
And there are other areas where this would impact directly.
Yeah, well, and if you're not near a residence, then you can idle your truck if you want to.
Okay. Does that work for staff?
Yep,
Do you
we
feel like
can-
you have enough direction?
We can bring that language back and we can map based on land use types, 500 foot, I think he said, around
Okay.
around residence.
Yeah.
All right.
See what's left, anyways.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
I believe I may have cut you off. I apologize. Were you going to add something to this, to item number 6?
No. I was thinking we were on 7.
Is there anything else that members of the planning board would like to bring up for discussion? I apologize. I just want to make sure we brought that back. I thought that was a
Yeah, no,
very
I
good point,
appreciate it.
yeah. All right, we'll move on to item number 7, miscellaneous. Upcoming items for June, we have FB environmental model on watershed findings. So that's, you want to explain that, or?
Yeah,
I was-
so
I
we
was about to
weren't
explain it, but I realized
we weren't expecting that in time for the second Tuesday, but the delay in the meeting, we do think that we will have a model by the 28th of June. So I think that's a benefit of being delayed, that you may see that.
And so that we remember, because they've already modeled something, but that specifically will include the changes to phosphorus control and specifically the change in lot size, yes?
Lot size and wastewater disposal, phosphorus control, and the agricultural buffers. I think we're, and we haven't been able to get the information out adequately, or it hasn't been received, and I think we're trying to do better at that with this model, is the package of changes that the planning board and council has considered so far for the Lake Auburn watershed, including the septic standard, has been deliberately trying to take advantage of changes that will improve watershed protections. And then with the planning board's recommendation to try to offset any increase in density by requiring a larger lot size, a lower density. We believe that the model is better for lake water quality than any of the scenarios that were modeled in the original report. And we want them to come back, model those, so we can have an accurate depiction of the package of changes without the increase of development that the other models included, so.
Will we, so one of the things that made the modeling specifically with regard to the number of houses that could exist, because they determined that there was like 360 some odd possible houses that could currently be built right now under the current standard. Dealing with the watershed all the time, I happen to know that most of the watershed is zoned agricultural. But I know that FB Environmental took the ag land and like cut it into 10-acre parcels and were like, yep, you can have a house here, 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 here. Not that that can't happen, but are we going to be given some clarity as to when they model out like what development looks like, how much of that they believe they modeled in the ag zone? Not because I want to throw that number out, but because I will look at that through a very different lens than stuff that's happening in the residential zone.
We can make sure we get that breakdown out of that study, out of that model. So yeah, we're hoping to have that report so that could be considered at the June meeting. But that's good feedback, and we can try to make sure that gets broken that way.
That was confusing for people, I think.
Yeah, and is this going to be another workshop then? Is that what you're looking at?
For the June 28th meeting, so that item will be, we can workshop the report that comes back from FB, but I think it will be the public hearing on considering increasing the rural residential lot size from 1 to 3 acres as well.
At the same
At the
meeting?
meeting, yep.
Okay, and so we'll make sure we have the understanding that in our rural residential area, how many lots we can build right now that are buildable right now versus how many lots would be buildable with the new septic and reduced
Yep.
density.
That's what we're aiming to get out of this revised model.
Okay, well yeah, just, I think only within the rural residential zone, right? Because that's what we're talking about. So I think those two numbers for me are the numbers that are going to allow me to make a decision. Like, if we don't change anything, I can build 50 houses. If we make these changes, I can now only build 30 houses, or I can build 150 houses. Like,
Yeah.
we just need to know those numbers.
And we are proposing to go beyond that and also have the breakdown for low-density country residential existing with the changes. And then tonight, talking about the ag to also make sure not to remove those numbers, but to understand those numbers.
To have them all labeled and to understand what's possible now versus what would be possible. Yeah, that's great.
And
Thank you.
If you look closely at the report, I think it's page 34 or 35, there's a table that compares all of the different development scenarios. Business as usual, I think it's 957 parts of phosphorus generated if we do nothing. The report says that we really need to get down to 900 in order to have a positive outcome over the next period of time through 2020, 2100 rather, and avoid the loss of the waiver of filtration during that period. The max development scenario with so business as usual, 957, I believe, max development with the village nodes and increasing the density in the watershed, but also implementing the septic standards and the low impact development standards gives us a phosphorus output of 959, only a couple more than business as usual. So what we believe we will see with the model and what we're hoping to understand is that because we are not proposing increase in density, but we are proposing the environmental restrictions, improvements, get the fairness argument out of a septic standard that's based on modern science compared to what we have now, we believe that it's going to deliver a better outcome than doing nothing. And we're really hoping that it gets us to that 900 mark where the report recommends that we should be able to avoid a loss of a waiver of filtration for the next 80 years.
And I don't recall, are they modeling nitrogen as well?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
that's, and other pollutants in that same chart.
So for some context to what we've done so far, which I think we're going to keep developing and looking at with the environmental report that we're going to get, is we've been looking directly at the map and looking at what was like probably not able to be developed because of the septic standards, and then like what's possible but also probable based on where the lot is. If it's ag, we'll consider all of that, and if there's anything else that you all want us to move into that, we can certainly do that.
I would ask that your probables not include like your opinion of what you think the owner might do. So really similar to the conversation we had earlier about the industrial zone, take the owner out of it. Is it buildable? Is it not buildable?
Thanks for that feedback. We also expect the Washington Street housing proposal that we've talked a little bit about for 96 units at Brickyard Circle. 5 Guys proposing a drive-through addition to their existing location, and Lewiston Junction Road recycling facility, a really large metal recycling facility off of Lewiston Junction Road. So.
Was Washington Street a market rate, or is that utilizing the tax credits?
No, it's entirely market rate, privately funded.
Any questions? Look, tell 5 Guys I want the drive-through completed prior to, and then we can just. We'll pretend like it didn't exist, but I can have some 5 Guys before the meeting. You know? All right. Is there a motion to item number 8? A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor? All right.
So just for clarification, you will be able to get a 5 Guys burger before the meeting. You will not be able to get it from the drive-thru.